I visited him like a month ago, and like it's basically like the baby needs to sleep a particular time to be free to do things. Yeah.
All right. Okay, fair enough. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Smudcast number 719. Why writers don't need a plan. Wow, what a bold statement. And for some reason, there's Battlestar Galactica Pipe Babylon 5 in the title. I don't know if you could do that. I don't know if you just put shows in your title. I guess that means you're going to talk about them, I hope. I have no clue. But this is from a YouTuber called Rowan J Coleman. We did cover him before, I'm sure at least a year ago. I do not recall being too impressed, but I wasn't also too turned off. So there must have been something I didn't like on one of his videos, but I wasn't blown away either way. So it was sort of middle of the road for me. So we'll find out what this guy has to say about writing. And if you don't know how writing works, there's two major ways to write. You plan everything out, beginning, middle, and ending, and you just go chapter by chapter. Or the other way is you don't plan anything, and you off the cuff, and you just write what feels good to you. And if you are a good writer who is seasoned, you get away with that. You know what you're doing. You don't have to plan everything out. The problem is there's not a lot of very good writers that can do that, let alone want to do that. They want to plan it out because when they get ideas for a story, you go, oh, I want my character to do this. So they write that scene in chapter 7 while they're still on chapter 2. So they're unconsciously planning things out whether they like it or not. That's just how the human mind connects the dots. It's not something you could stop. So it is wiser to slow down and stop writing and say, wait a second, what do I really want to do? And then you figure out, I should figure this out before I continue, or else I'm going to write something I don't want to write, or my mind will not allow me once I get past a certain point in my actual writing. So this is, in theory, a bad topic, and I think he's automatically incorrect. But, maybe Battlestar Galactica writers will disprove me wrong with their amazing ending that everyone, I'm sure, loved. And it made everyone happy, I'm sure, with what they came up with.
The most fundamental rule of all writing is only the first draft is always shit.
Even if there is a first draft, usually there never is a real first draft. It's always in flux. So you're constantly editing and fixing and changing and adding. And
but that's why the first draft is your very first original thing, and the moment you make your first change to it, it's not the first draft anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to say that you can get away with this sort of thing, and unless it's a short story, unless it's a poem, unless it's like 2 pages or 3 pages. You have to figure out what you're doing before you continue. So. I don't know. I really wish this guy would give me that golden pathway to spontaneous, perfect writing. So maybe he's got some guidelines, but I highly doubt it. Anyway, 14-minute video. Let's get started. See what he has to say.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for content creators and business owners to create their own beautiful websites. Battlestar Galactica came out at an interesting time in television. Today, viewers expect there to be a continuous story playing out over multiple seasons like a television novel. When Battlestar Galactica came out, however, there was still the idea that a show needed to hook in new viewers who may be channel surfing or checking out a one-off episode. To this end, each episode of Battlestar Galactica begins with an intro explaining the general, capping things off with an insistence that the antagonists of the show, the Cylons, have a plan. This phrase has become incredibly ironic to some viewers who even today express dissatisfaction over the show's final season and ending. A common complaint which is often raised is that it became incredibly obvious that producers David Icke and Ronald D. Moore were seemingly making things up as they went along, and that unlike the Cylons, the writers did not have a plan.
Okay, so he's referring to the ending credits where the last 20 seconds or whatever, they have this little, they were copied, they rebelled, and they have a plan. It's like, okay. And they talk about that. Ronald Moore talks about how the Cylons never had a plan, And he said that was thrown in there for David Icke, I think, because he thought it sounded cool. And for the next he says, the next 14 years of my life, people have asked me, what was the plan? There was no plan. So that was just a silly little marketing thing, which is kind of weird to do in your show at the end of your show for new viewers that may have didn't see the first few episodes or something.
Yeah, just that's don't do that.
That's weird. Yeah.
If you don't have a plan, if you know they don't have a plan, don't false advertise.
That's especially in your show. That's the silliest thing to do, and to have this meta context of, they were cloned, they were copied, they rebelled. It's like, okay, you're summarizing the plot. I get it, but you don't have to do that.
Not even. It's just random words, really.
Yeah, make a 20-second ad on the network that it's on, that you could buy from the network for time, so people could be like, hey, that might be cool to watch, like an advertisement. That'd be great. But not in the show itself. That's kind of weird. But even if you were to make that ad, you'd then have to actually have a story with the Cylons wanting to do something outside of kill the humans. And you could argue, well, the Cylons wanted to figure out their humanity because they copied humans and they blamed humanity, so they wanted to kill the humans first and then take over their planets, and that would be one of their plans. But that's this one group of clones or one group of copies that wanted to do that, and then that's one subplot. That's not the actual plot. So, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean that you can't have a plan. It doesn't mean the bad guys who are mysterious need a plan. But if you say they have one, well, you gotta give the audience what you expect. So it's bad marketing within the show itself.
They could have taken up this marketing blunder as a challenge and rewritten the plot to make sense.
Yeah, if we were to, let's say, look at other science fiction like Mass Effect, where if we had no idea what the Reapers were doing and we just focused on the drama of characters trying to figure out how to survive, which happened at the end of the first Mass Effect, where Vigil's pretty much saying, what does it matter? Who cares what the Reapers want? We just need to survive and stop them. And that would have been great. That would have been a great story. You just focus entirely on the guys trying to save the day as opposed to what we got. So, these things can work out. They can work out well. But a good writer knows how to bullshit his way through a lack of a story or a lack of a plot with something.
Yeah, in that case, the example with the Reapers, if you played it as the ominous threat, like it's a very visible, very big, giant space shrimp threat.
Yeah.
But if the Reapers don't reveal any of their plans, if you don't stumble upon any of that, and you just see them doing their destruction stuff, and get at best like these tiny hints, then your mind fills out the rest.
And they could just be the mysterious evil big bad that you don't need to personify. You don't need to give them some elements of like, oh, well, they enslave this species and they speak through them. Like you don't necessarily need to have any of that. You just need a bunch of humanoids running around trying to solve a problem that's really hard to fix, and just focus on the drama of that. And even if it's everyone dies at the end, or there is no end, it keeps going, and we have shepherds standing on a planet looking out to the horizon, and the camera pulls out and then it just cuts to black, and you're like, oh, what happened? At least that would be the point of the story, which is the struggle is the whole thing we're trying to get at, and whether we win or lose is not important.
Lots of very, very old games on very old systems had basically such storytelling because they didn't have any space for cutscenes, for text much. Well, they could have done more text, but then you would have just to read through pages, and that isn't much fun on an NES or Game Boy.
Yeah, you get the people standing on a cliff looking at the sunset as the castle explodes in Castlevania games. So you don't need some grand ethic, moral punchline or lesson. It could just be the struggle. The struggle is still going on, and the climax was reached. Someone changed their mind about fighting again or giving up or whatever the climax was, and boom, story over. And that would have been totally fine. Everyone would have been like, yep, Reapers are a big mystery. You can tell this story next year with another game if you want. You can keep the series going, do another spin-off in the same universe. And people would be like, great, yeah, no, it's a mystery. Keep it going. That's great.
You could also competently bullshit your way to the sequel and the final finale of the trilogy if you don't really know where to take it, by seeing where all the fan theories and fan fictions go, and then cherry pick that together into something cohesive.
That's if you're really like bottom of the barrel. I have no idea what to do next. Let me just ask the internet and fan.
I would say it would have helped Mass Effect.
Some of the fan fiction's pretty bad. Let's just say. Maybe
that is always the case. That is Sturgeon's law.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the ending, just go with indoctrination theory. And, please, just scrap that Star Child nonsense, please.
I don't know. I think both have their own ups and downs. But anyway,
you like the traffic light ending?
To do mind fuckery, whatever you want to call it,
like Deus Ex Human Revolution. Here's a big button. Doesn't matter what you did in the game, but now you decide the ending.
Nihilism
no
is
what
great.
You did.
Yeah, I love nihilism. Anyway, no. There are ways to do. It was all a dream with a twist. And I don't think the writers are, especially in Mass Effect, at that point of the production. Like if you're talking about Mass Effect 1, yeah, Drew Karpatian could have totally pulled it off by himself. Yes, I agree. But not what happened in 2 and 3 to do what you are referring to, which is on the level of, let's say, the sophistication of, let's say, American Psycho, like that sort of twist that you would have to pull off on a huge scale in a science fiction story is really tough. So it has to be planned out. You cannot just do that on a whim. So.
Yes, you succeed and be remembered in gaming history,
or
you die trying.
That was one of the articles someone wrote. If this was the case, that the DLC would add that in and change how we looked at things, and it was one giant marketing stunt to get you to get pissed off for 2 months or 3 months until the extended cut came out, and it was like, oh, it was real, and then everyone has to replay the game again and look at all the cues, and
would have been great.
That would have been a masterwork, but I don't think BioWare was anywhere close to even attempting that.
Were they still capable to that at the time? Had they gone for it?
Not with Matt Walters, not with Casey Hudson, not with any of the guys on production. Remember, this is after Mass Effect 2, where Drew was gone by then. So all the talent was gone, all the original writers are gone, and you might have had some guys like hangovers from Mass Effect 2 that might have been called in, but no, that is way too complicated for anyone on the team. From the Montreal studio or anyone else, there's no way. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
I found this criticism quite interesting because it implies that if Eikenmore did go into the series with a detailed plan, it would have improved the show immensely.
Yes, in theory, I would always argue yes. The planning out will make it better, whether it's a dinner, a festival, an event, doesn't matter.
The strange thing is, there's a strange thing about this, and that is that there was the 80s show of Battlestar that also went nowhere. But that means you had a 20-year-old framework to build on.
Oh yeah,
and you didn't.
Plus the spin-off Caprica, which was interesting to say the least, and you could that was probably successful for what it was trying to do, which was tell a side story in its own way about the first human colony that who created the Cylons or whatever they did. So yeah, there's things to do in this universe, and because of the popularity of the reboot, they could have ran with it. It's the same thing that happened to J.J. Abrams' Lost. You know, it had all these hooks. It kept like, ooh, what's that? I don't know. It's a mystery. And it just amounted to I think the same style of ending of Lost as Battlestar. It was it's spoilers, obviously. 20-year show.
The thing is, the ending of Battlestar is trying to play into this everything is a loop. Humanity's history loops, and then you somehow magically add God's servants that
Angels.
invisibly walk around.
Yeah.
Like what? Where did that come from?
All right, here's
Did they do that before?
yes, many times. Anyway, here's Gigaman. Thanks for the 5, sir. I don't know why you're not on the panel, but okay. A good example of writers capitalizing on a poorly thought out idea. Oh God, just go anywhere. Was when Spider-Man's black costume was created for Secret Wars due to toy licensing issues, but then other writers took the idea and ran with it, eventually creating Venom. Okay, well, that's explanation of an artistic choice with backstory. So that
Sounds like an inspiration run.
I don't know who did that. Yeah, I have to research that to figure out, because we've seen the black suit for decades and it's been around for a long, long time. And then they finally fleshed it out with a good explanation. They made another Rogues Gallery characters, and it's anything with conflict is going to add character to a story.
When you make your show, especially when you remake your show 20 years later, just as, I have this setup idea. Yeah, the setup of Battlestar is amazing. But you need to finish it. You need to know where you're going. Especially when it's a continuous story and not just some serialized thing of, let's visit this planet today.
Yeah, that's why we can keep the bad guys and their motives mysterious. We don't necessarily need to give them an overarching plot, as cool as that might be. So the classic example is to give people motivation, give characters motivation, make them have a plan, even if they don't get there. It's just there's something they're striving for, so we know. But you can get around that. And unfortunately, their idea was to say, let's not do that. Their idea was just to say, let's wing it. And that's not what you do.
A problem that I had a few times with Battlestar was that the writing felt very, very much more like soap opera instead of space opera.
It happened a lot, yeah.
You had repeat plots with the same characters, with people being extremely dumb, being trusting where they should be suspicious, and surprise twist 13 again.
All right.
But this is what I'd like to interrogate, because it's an idea I've seen bandied about a lot in online film and TV discourse. There are some people who flat out say that a writer shouldn't even start writing the first page until they have everything mapped out in advance. In this case, the most apt point of comparison to Battlestar Galactica is the space opera epic Babylon 5.
I just want to bring up a guess here. The only thing he could bring up as for his point that Babylon 5 wouldn't need a plan would be that you had necessary changes to actors, therefore characters, therefore needed to rewrite the story. Because of that, for the main character in the first season he had very bad health issues, so he needed to be written out of the story and replaced. And then they got told, no, you can't have 5 seasons, you only get 4. Then they had to cut down the whole story to cram it into 4 seasons. And because the show had pretty good ratings, the studio then said again, your show's doing really good, you get another season. And they were like, we just used up the story, what the fuck are we going to do now? And they somehow wrote an okay-ish 5th season that gives an outlook into the future.
That's a pretty good example, because Straczynski was working with the producers, and they were sticking their hands in where it doesn't belong, and they were changing things and adding things and telling him what to do. So even despite that, he managed to pull it off with at least a cogent last season to finish off the series. And he was also on record talking about how he planned out the beginning, the middle, and the end, and maybe there's like 8 or 9 episodes which were throwaway out of the entire show, like all four seasons, that had nothing to do with the overarching plot. So that
some if you rewatch the show from the beginning, you get these what you mentioned with Mass Effect. You get these hints at the like if you had the indoctrination theory, you get these hints at the big story, but you can't recognize them as such on your first watch. They just seem like standalone episodes with weird stuff. And they seem like a Star Trek serialized thing where you have these special events. There's this weird character coming along with his soul orbs, and the other is this invisible predator alien, but they're all connected.
Yeah, and like Mr. Morden is just there for like, who is this weird dude, and why are there techno mages? What are they for? And it all just connects into this past that no one knows about yet regarding the shadows. So yeah, that was all just using the main plot to then color the world to explain why these weird other beings exist, and not knowing that until you get to like season 3. So yeah, no, it was very well thought out, and that was one of the major reasons, outside of the story being just well put together and the acting and the sets and all the lighting and the budget they were on, what they could pull off. It was those little, it's connected. Like that's brilliant. Like it means it's well thought out. So you get a payoff a year later. It's like, that's so cool.
Contrary to most other shows, really, really well written dialogue.
Oh yeah,
that makes you sit back and think and take in the scene, and acting that is above most other things on screen, especially in the 90s. Like the who was it? Alexander Katsulas was Chikar, Londo Mollari. I forgot the name of the actor right now. The man could deliver an entire scene worth of meaning with just one word that he said differently than he usually does, and you notice the depth of how this character is currently struck by a situation, because he always has the mask on, and just for one moment he says the word without the mask on. Absolutely brilliant.
I think the idea behind the alien species that Londo was this mix of everything European. It was just like this. Let's get the European world and just slam it all together and make it pop, make it blow it up, make it bigger than life.
Make it French Roman Empire.
It was just like, what was the accents? It's just everything. Just everything.
And Londo's was special. Londo's was Demon Clown.
Okay. And the thing,
and that wasn't his real voice, because in that moment where he doesn't have the mask on for a few seconds, he doesn't speak like that. He speaks like a normal person.
And the joke that Peter Jurassic was pulling on,
that was his name,
Straczynski, because he was in the makeup, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to walk around with my hair just blown up like a peacock," and Michael was like, "Yeah, we're going to use that." It's like, what are you talking about? No, I was just goofing around.
That was how that happened?
Yeah, no, he was just goofing around in makeup because they spend so much time in there, and he's like, just have some fun, whatever, do whatever you want. And they gave him this, the Centauri haircut, which is this giant peacock look. And he started walking around like that, and he walked into his office, and he's like, I like that. He's like, what do you mean you like this? This is a joke.
And the thing is, it also fits into this thing, the Napoleonic hat. The white brimmed one where there's the arc above. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it
perfectly fits in.
It's such a generically done, obvious, like, yeah, these are the aristocrats of the galaxy. They're right there. It makes so obvious sense. And of course they sound like they're so above us all, and they know so much, and they're not the strongest, but they just know everyone. So it's kind of fun. And of course they got like all these gods and they're hedonists, and it's great. Anyway, good fun.
Let's talk not about the tentacles.
Yeah.
Babylon 5 often sing the praises of its creator J. Michael Straczynski for supposedly having all 5 seasons planned out in advance. But I think it's worth looking at the creative processes behind both of these shows to see if having a plan in advance really helped Babylon 5 as much as the apparent absence of a plan apparently hurt Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
Moderate spoilers for both of these shows, by the way. But before we get into that, this video is sponsored by Square's Outdoor Manager. With Square's Fluid Engine, allow site with your... Now, on with the video. Well, both shows are very different at a conceptual level. What I mean by that is, while Babylon 5 set out to explicitly be a television novel, telling one large story with a proper beginning, middle, and end, this wasn't the case for Battlestar Galactica. Due to the original show's cancellation and Galactica 1980 being largely disregarded, there was no ending in mind for Battlestar Galactica in the first place. No one knew exactly how long the show would last. It could be a handful of miniseries or TV movies, or it might go for 7 seasons like The Next Generation did. It's worth keeping this in mind when making a statement like, Battlestar Galactica ended badly because the writers had no plan, because it implies that the writers were expected to have a plan from the start.
Okay, but let's say it ended at season 2, right? Would the writers say, yeah, we had a 5-year plan? They didn't have any plan, as far as I know. They were winging it because that was like, oh, this is what we want to do. The producers let us do it. The network said okay, and we did it. If they said we had this thing to go on for 3 or 4 seasons, and then they would have made and fleshed that out, they would have done all the necessary budgeting, they would have told the network would have said yes or no, and they would have adapted that to that. This is like building a house. If you don't have a blueprint, what are you doing? You're just digging holes in the ground and filling it up with concrete and hoping for the best. So to have this argument is like, well, this is the creative process and they don't know what they're doing. That happened with Babylon 5. Michael didn't know.
Yeah, and
Joe didn't know.
Out of accident.
Yeah.
And Babylon 5 is actually a good example that if you do know what you're doing and they tell you, oh no, do the 5th season anyway, but I finished the story.
Yeah.
And you're good enough, you know your universe, you know in your head how it would play out anyway after this. You know an interesting story to tell after that.
And
that is not the problem. You can come up with another plot. It may just be a season-long epilogue, which season 5 kind of feels like.
Yeah, and they also screwed around with the sequel, or the spin-off, which was Crusade.
The what? The what?
Oh yeah, okay, never mind. They were so, like, the producers again got their hands in so deep that they had episodes filmed and presented in out of order. Even the outfits they got, the uniforms were off. Like, everything was just done backwards, and it was so difficult for Joe to do his job. He just had to stop. So there's all kinds of creative processes stopping you, or things stopping the creative process, even with a plan.
Honestly, all that producers should do is offer the money.
Yeah.
If they're not themselves main writers, the main writer, and not in a team of like a dozen weirdos that are too many cooks anyway.
Yeah.
If you're not the writer who is wealthy enough to be his own producer, go away.
Yeah, it's
stay out of the way.
It's the champion. The producer of anything is the champion of the project. They're not the creative. They're not the director. They're not the actor or the artist. They are the guy writing the checks and going, "Do it! I believe in you. You're the best. You're the guy. Go for it, director."
Yeah, producers are not supposed to be the creative people.
Exactly.
And other example would be Stargate SG-1. That is a serialized show that the first season completely we just go from planet to planet. We don't even know what we really are kind of show.
There you go.
Second season, we are comedy. And it just gets to be amazing by the halfway point of the second season. And over the course of 10 years, that show develops a consistent background plot, and in later seasons, later episodes, refers to Babylon 5 does a similar thing, but SG1 does this to a much larger degree. Refers to the old space technology, alien gadgets that they acquired in their long run, in their long expeditions, and think, hey, there's this new problem. Wait, we already have something in the vault that does that from episode so and so. Like any nerd at a convention would ask, hey, why didn't you use that? And SG1 asks itself that question, brings that thing up, combines it with another gadget, and solves the problem. And then you get you can argue about the quality of it, but the story even gets concluded. At least the SG1 story. The other stuff that's debatable. So you can wing it if you care about what you're doing. Battlestar, I'm not sure they did. And that's the problem. Or they didn't know how to. Who knows?
Yeah.
Actually extremely rare in TV writing. J. Michael Straczynski created Babylon 5 with the specific intention of telling the story of the rise and fall of empires. A concept like this logically requires some kind of big event to happen to tell this story. What could lead to the rise and fall of empires? War. What would make this particular war stand out? It would have to be something all-encompassing against an incredibly powerful enemy.
Okay.
You can see how a story arc like the Shadow War would naturally emerge from this base concept. In Battlestar Galactica, however, that's not the case. BSG is a show in motion. The fleet is always on the move. Unlike Star Trek before it, this kind of status quo naturally lends itself to more episodic storytelling. There's the overall goal of finding Earth, but that goal doesn't immediately conjure up
Battlestar is an Exodus story.
An arc with a defined beginning, middle, and end like the Shadow War does in Babylon 5. Because of this, Ronald D. Moore and
the Shadow War is not even the full story. That's just the first part. But
executive producer David Icke only ever planned out Battlestar Galactica 10 episodes at a time. But that doesn't mean they just came up with whatever off the top of their heads. There were two mechanisms they used to steer the ship. The first was the series Bible. While Babylon 5 may have had a map, Battlestar Galactica still had a compass. Moore had a crystal clear picture of what BSG was and what it wasn't, which kept the writing team focused in terms of possible directions to take the show in. The second mechanism is what I like to call the yes and approach to storytelling. This is actually a common thing among thriller writers who sometimes deliberately write themselves into corners just to see if they can get out of it.
That's also a technique in impromptu comedy. You always say yes and at the end of whatever they're saying to make you laugh. Not a lot of people like that style of comedy. Like, whose line is it anyway? But that's the common response to keep the scene going. Yes, and okay.
I haven't ever noticed that.
Yeah,
and I personally can't imagine it for writing. I don't think it would be a style or technique for me.
Yeah, think of not the opposite, but think of in normal conversation. When I say yes and, that means I'm agreeing with you, and then I'm adding to what you're saying. Whereas if I say yes, but I'm agreeing with you, but then I'm also pulling it back and saying, but I think you're wrong on this point. So that's kind of the opposite. Sorry?
I'm sorry. It sounds like this is just what J.J. Abrams does, and why he, in a really bad way, and why he uses his mystery boxes so much. Because it's just random bullshit slapped together.
Well, that's a whole other issue with whatever hook he's trying to create that goes nowhere. It's kind of like if you're going to invent a Chekhov's gun, the gun not only should be fired, but the bullet has to go somewhere. It has to mean something. You can't just, it's a gun. Look, I'm using the gun in the first scene. You're like, to do what? What are you doing with it?
Make a Chekhov's gun joke by just randomly firing it so that it has been fired as a meta joke.
Or something.
Aha.
Yeah, you have to actually connect to something meaningful, like the plot would be good. Yeah, no, you can't just have stuff on the wall that gets used. So, anyway.
No, I think if I tried that, with the yes and writing myself into a corner approach deliberately. That might be interesting, but I think I would get too frustrated and would have to discard too much stuff.
It's not.
Because that happens naturally already enough. Like, these are the logical consequences of events, and I want them to make sense, because it's contrary to reality, a story has to make sense somewhat. When you're then... So you will naturally end up in such situations where you have to ask yourself anyway, well, how does this continue in a plausible, believable way with the people alive that I want to be alive and the ones that don't, not necessarily.
It's one way of gauging the two characters in a dialogue, whether or not the one is getting along with the other, as opposed to just having conflict, because most dialogue is conflict. So if you just have a guy who says yes and all the time, then it's going to be a pretty copacetic, straightforward, positive, nothing's really happening until the next scene, which is hopefully exciting or dangerous or violent or whatever the case is. So it's not so much a technique as it is, oh, these people are getting along. You're talking to someone in public you just met, and you're trying to get them to be comfortable around you. So it's not necessarily a writing and dialogue technique. It's just a form of conversational style that, at least in English, I don't know how it works in other languages. So maybe there's a compliance or a positive at the start of a sentence, and then you go into an example. But
the most important part there is that the story comes across as more natural and organic rather than forced. The more something feels like some Deus Ex thing or just another way of forcing a situation or scene, it breaks the suspension of disbelief, and that's what you don't want.
You're thinking in terms of a scene and a character's actions as, oh, the character is in this mode. So even if they don't say yes and, imagine they're just the strong silent type, so they'll nod their head and they'll go about their business, or they'll look directly in the other person's eyes and squint, and then whatever positive action results from that. So there's all sorts of ways to play that scenario of two people interacting with yes and. So it's all about interpersonal relations at that point. It's not about positive reinforcement and let's get the scene going with action. Let's add some conflict. No, it's just, this is the character. You're thinking in terms of the mode, not in terms of the language they're using. Anyway.
And Babylon 5 has a great way of having very organic, natural unfolding scenes, usually in the open, versus real theatric stage plays, like the things that happen in Londo's apartment.
Oh, well, there's slice of life stuff all over the place that you're like, why is that? Why are we seeing Jakar cook? Like, what is that about? Or why does he have a girl's panties in his couch? Like, I don't understand. Like, there's all this stuff.
Well, it adds all of these details add character.
Oh yeah, they do. It's just random. It's like, what is going on?
Yeah, but it's this. One of my favorite parts is Londo with his wives in his apartment. The whole thing looks like an Oscar Wilde theatric play.
Yeah. All right.
I started typing, and I got 10 pages in and going, oh my god, he's dead.
Sonia's dead.
She's dead. What's going on here? And you go, well, you better work it out because you're getting paid to do it.
Do you ever find that you've painted yourself into a corner?
Oh, yeah. But I love... Yeah, no, it is. I mean, there's multiple split personality in a really healthy occupational way where you're going, oh, you think I can't get out of this one? I think I can't.
Okay, this is not... This is not what a writer should be doing. A writer should never be saying to themselves, you know what, I'm going to be so clever. I'm going to do the worst thing I could think of and climb up that tree and not know how to come down. But because I'm so brilliant, I'm going to figure it out when I get up there. It's like, no, that is not... Unless you're a really good writer and you've done that thousands of times, that's not something a writer should be doing. Because we've seen it just fail immensely in any genre. And in any instance, unless this guy has the chops of like a Harlan Ellison who could take 20 ideas and make a setting with and a series of characters and dialogue and scenarios on the fly, then okay, prove it. But this is not, you are not going into writing because you're clever. When Agatha Christie writes a murder mystery, she doesn't go, I am so clever, I'm going to write a locked door murder, twin cousin inheritance / accomplice multiple murder. Like, she's not going to do that. She's going to do one, maybe two things, because if you do any more than that, you've lost 90% of your audience. That's the problem with her Miss Marple stories. In case you guys have not read Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, she goes over the top compared to her Poirot series, which is a bit more digestible, even though those are pretty hard too. But she just goes nuts with Miss Marple in terms of complexity, and it's almost completely unbelievable at times. And believe it or not, the BBC versions actually water it down because they're so, like, Miss Marple knows everyone. She's a ventriloquist. She's in the right place at the right time. She's seen this 1,000 times. Like, hey, this old lady, really? She's been in this little town, in the middle of Yorkshire or whatever she is. So yeah, there's some things that you just can't swallow with being a clever writer.
Like that all the time, going, yeah, bet you can't, and it is professional petulance, and I love proving that I can when the odds are against me.
A great example of how this affected the writing in Battlestar Galactica concerns the character Carl Hilo Agathon. The character was only supposed to appear in the miniseries, being assumed dead when the series proper began. But as it turns out, the cast, crew, and network executives all really liked Tamo Pinnaket, so they decided to keep him on for season 1. However, this raised several issues. If you're at all familiar with script writing, I assume you've seen the Matt Stone Trey Parker lecture on good plotting.
We can take these beats, which are basically the beats of your outline, and if the words "and then" belong between those beats, you're basically. You got something pretty boring. What should happen between every beat that you've written down is either the word "therefore" or "but."
This is something Ronald D. Moore, knowingly or not, was aware of when constructing the storyline following Agathon on Cylon-occupied Caprica. If Moore had stuck to the original plan, Agathon would have died off screen. But by coupling yes and with but therefore, we end up with something pretty interesting. Keep Agathon alive, yes, and we have a new story thread following him on Cylon-occupied Caprica.
Or keep him dead, and you have another story that someone else wrote about another character. What is your point? Like, that's not. Why not have
I'm not really sure he's identifying this correctly.
This is not, because character's alive, therefore you can write him again. It's like, yeah, what's your point?
I think a better counterexample for no, it's not a good. No, he wants to make the case that you don't need a plan, because I wanted to bring up Voyager, and that would have profited from having a plan, which the writers wanted to do, but the producers didn't allow.
Well, but that's just...
Which makes absolutely no sense, because the whole thing was a continuing, developing story over time.
All we're doing here is pointing out, here's a plot thread that I forgot about. Let's bring it back. Like with Star Trek, you got dozens of examples, like Hugh. They brought Hugh back for whatever reason. Nagilum, they totally forgot about that plot thread. So there's all these characters and gods and aliens just running around, and they don't resolve them, they don't conclude them, they're just there. They're in the universe. So all you're saying with this is like, yes, and we cloned him and he's back again. We killed him. Oh yeah, we killed Tashiar and her alternate universe daughter is back. It's like, okay, I mean,
yeah, that was, and this is where you see a difference between Stargate SG-1 and Stargate Atlantis. Stargate Atlantis did random shit, just added random shit. It didn't seem to have that overarching idea that went anywhere,
Right.
aside from ruining inventions of SG-1, but details. So it's I think Matt and Trey were onto something here, but our friend here is not identifying it right.
Yeah. And even with that technique, you can write a good individual story. There's plenty of good Stargate Atlantis stories which are awesome that have no connection, or they'll invent like what are they called? The Genii, who are just these weird low-tech military types who propose a threat, but in the certain circumstances they can take over the Atlantis. So you could do that and then bring them back later in a plot thread, and you could keep doing that. That's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's a good idea or it's going to work again.
All the cities on Caprica were nuked, and if we have to depict bombed-out city ruins every other week, the visual effects budget will end up spiraling out of control. Therefore, if we want to shoot in Vancouver as it is, doesn't that mean the Cylons deliberately left some cities standing and cleared away all the bodies? Yes, and they did.
That's fine, but all you're doing is saying, we need a set, we can't afford one, let's use what we got, so let's set up the setting, the character motives of the Cylons to allow a concrete world with plants or whatever the scene is.
We spent everything on the CGI.
Yeah, there's plenty of reasons and methods and techniques and stories to explain concrete cityscape with plants. You don't need to transform the Cylons into non-killing human stories. Like it doesn't really matter. This is explanation could be one of like 20. I don't get the point.
That because they didn't just want to wipe out the colonies, they wanted to colonize the planets themselves.
Yeah, but that's after wiping out the humans. But why did they want to colonize? That's the question. That's what we're getting at here, because no one knows. Did they want to just dominate the humans and wipe them out and then just figure out their humanity because they were based off humans? Was that the plan? Like, what is it? Like, that's what we want to know.
For a consciousness story, it's not that well telegraphed.
Yeah, it's like, oh, Vancouver, we're using that to shoot a scene. Great. Do you have an overarching plan where the Cylons want to do this in the future, and we're not there yet, so that's why we don't use it yet. We're just scouting out scenes for a future episode. That's fine. But if you had a plan, then you know that, okay, next year when we film, we're going to come back to this spot and film this scene. In a dream, it could be a dreamscape, it could be an actual scene, it doesn't matter. That's the plan. You see, all he's trying to do is like, well, because setting, therefore, let's rewrite the villains and their plot. You're like, that's stupid. that's just stupid. That means I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm here in this Burger King and it looks really good. So I'm going to use this back wall of the Burger King as a scene for my backdrop. You're like, what? Okay. The Cylons protected the Burger King.
Okay, so Agathon on the run from the Cylons. What if he gets captured? Yes, and what if he's rescued by Sharon? Yes, but by this point the viewers know Sharon is a Cylon. Therefore, this must be part of some Cylon plan. They definitely seem to be growing closer because of all of this. Is that part of the Cylon plan too? Yes, and that plan is about Cylon reproduction. Therefore...
This is reaching. This guy is really, at this point, because...
I'm lost.
Yeah, he's talking about this one character who we know is a Cylon, and then we know there's copies of her. So he's saying, well, now that the audience knows it's a Cylon, and no one else does, therefore it's part of a plan. Yes, it's part of a plot with her specifically and her group of people, but not the Cylons as a whole. There's no overarching plan with the Cylons that we know of. It's just her saying, I want to do this, and her copies are sort of going along with that.
Battlestar Galactica, the board game, is really, really good.
Yeah. So is the Dune one.
And there's a Dune board game?
Yeah, it's really it's hard, but it's cool.
Recent one?
No, it's came out must have been 8 years ago. I don't remember the time frame.
Well, I consider that recent in board game history. I'll check that one out. Storytelling wise, the Battlestar Galactica board game shows and it's based on the series, of course. But it shows you have just the basic strand of the story, which is fleet, go to Earth, and you get on this trek. And you have the Cylons that try to sabotage that. You don't need there's no explanation for why.
Yeah, and
you just play that. But with just that, you have your skeleton of your basic, maybe the spine. You have the spine of your story. And why is it so difficult to build a sensible story from that? I don't see the issue. Why do you need that to be a soap opera with dumb twists, with Shyamalan nonsense?
Yeah, I mean, what he's referring to with the Asian character here, that could easily have been a unplanned subplot in the scope of a main plot that was planned. That's what Straczynski did. He didn't plan out every single episode and what was going to happen. He knew that in some episodes he had to introduce these elements so they work with the major plot. So what he's...
Yeah, and that would roughly define that episode already, because you would get your 1, 2, 3 story beats in that.
Right, so...
all these episodes in Babylon 5, they have an A plot, a B plot,
right, exactly,
which reflects the A plot. It's the same theme. They have the same theme. And sometimes you have a tertiary C plot that is just super tiny. That's just 2 scenes or something. And they can encapsulate the whole thing and show another facet of the same theme. It's where the term theme is used properly.
And that's why this if this was a subplot, like with this Cylon chick, it didn't matter where it went. She could all her clones could die or achieve their goal. It doesn't really matter. So long as the main A plot or the main overarching plot is facilitated through the subplot. And that's what you want. That's what you want to see. It's like, oh, this is a building block to the main story. We just don't know it yet because we don't know what the main story goal is, because that's the secret and that's the mystery we're all trying to figure out. So that is how you write a connected subplot to the main plot with side characters. And this guy's like, yeah, no, just wing it. Just it's fun this way. It's like, yeah, okay.
For basic example, a very obvious example, in B5, an A plot was, I may mix them up, 2 characters coming together in a new marriage. That was the main characters. A divorced couple meeting again, but still falling apart, but in good terms. And the C plot was a mix of that. That was more like a commentary between the 2. But none of these 3 stories had anything directly to do with the other. But they all had the same theme, and they, in the long run, all contributed to the story. And that's how you do this right.
All right. So, again, this guy he's seeing like the surface level of things, unfortunately, which is not wrong. You could make a story like this, and it could be dramatic and comedic and action filled and whatever. But if that's all it is, it's like, yeah, an artist can just randomly draw an image if he's a good artist and it will look good. Or you could have the artist figure out where everything's going to go before he draws it, and then he slowly puts his masterpiece together the way it should be without having to guess as he goes. Hopefully getting something good.
currently reproduce on their own. And we end up with the entire overarching story of Battlestar Galactica. Because Moore decided to break with the original plan to kill off Agathon, there is a strict...
That raises already the question. Are the Cylons the machines, or are the Cylons the human copy people? What of the two are you referring to? Because the machine Cylons, that's a whole different story. But, God. Fuck off.
Straight line from the storyline this decision created to the very final episode. It's actually remarkable how many plot lines, story beats, and character arcs would have changed if Agathon stayed dead like he was supposed to. Now you'll notice one of the beats I mentioned in that example wasn't anything to do with the actual story, but was a practical consideration of the visual effects budget. This is another reason why strict adherence to a plan as opposed to improvisational writing can seriously damage a TV series. And no one knows this better than, ironically enough, J. Michael Straczynski. In The Complete Book of Script Writing by Straczynski himself, he quotes the old military saying, "No plan survives contact with the enemy." As I said earlier, there's...
Yeah, but he has one. He had... If he has nothing... then there's nothing to fall back on.
Yeah, coming to the battle without a plan at all is worse. You need to have a plan, and then you.
This is like saying, "Don't prepare, don't worry about it, you'll be fine. Just wing it."
There's perception from a lot of Babylon 5 fans that JMS had the whole 5-season arc of Babylon 5 planned way ahead of time.
He had the major story beats, the beginning, the middle, and end, a few episodes, a few plot lines, a few characters, a few specific events. For sure. He must have. He wrote them down. But the details, the individual scenes of individual episodes, of course not. No one can do that. Can you imagine him writing down, and like he actually said, it was like writing a novel every 4 months. He was like, boom, boom, boom. He was kept pumping them out. But he didn't know what he was going to write exactly. He has to do the writing first. Okay.
This is true to some degree. Those plans changed drastically as the show went on. In the Babylon 5 script book number 15, JMS actually included an outline of his plan for the show, which he made between The Gathering and Season 1. I'll put a link below to where you can read a summary of it, but suffice to say, it's very different to the show we ended up getting. A big change fans know is obviously the departure of Michael O'Hare's Commander Sinclair, replaced by Bruce Boxleitner's Captain Sheridan. It's easy to assume Sheridan simply adopted the original arc intended for Sinclair, but the differences between the actual show and the original outline go way beyond that. Straczynski's vision for Babylon 5 was certainly pioneering in terms of storytelling, but JMS was also a pragmatist when it came to the making of the show. The whole idea of setting a series aboard a space station using CG effects and remote music production came out of budgetary concerns. Going back to the old saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy, in the TV world that enemy is time and money. It's certainly true that Straczynski didn't approach Babylon 5 in exactly the same way as Ronald D. Moore did with Battlestar Galactica, but to say the Babylon 5 we got is the result of JMS sticking to his pre-created plan simply isn't true. Which I suppose brings me to the ultimate takeaway from this video. When it comes to writing or the creative process in general, very rarely is there a definitive right way of doing things. I am generalizing with the title of this video in saying that writers don't need a plan because I know some of them do. For some writers, sitting down and typing up the screenplay is the payoff to the hard work they've done outlining their story. But for plenty of other writers, they find the story through writing.
Starting without a story outline can really hurt you.
It's like eating a dessert and missing the main meal.
But then that's just our experience. So there are writers who can do it, who sit down and sort of enjoy, and I'll find out where I'm going. The bastards, we call them, talented bastards.
Well, that's what I mean. If you're experienced enough to do that, and you have the knowledge of what you're going to be coming back to, like, oh yeah, I figured this out chapter 1, I know what I'm doing for chapter 5, like you've already planned it out in your head in some capacity. So when you start writing and you're like, all right, I know where I'm going. I just didn't actually write chapter 10 down, or I didn't hit Control Enter 10 times to go to page 10 to write down chapter 10 and then, type in what I wanted to do. That's fine. But you still have to perceive what's going to happen in the future. You can't just like, oh, and this is going to, and then this is, it's like, no one writes like that. When you see people write off the cuff very quickly and type very quickly, like Harlan Ellison, that's like when he's 65 or 70 and he has like 5 different stories in his head at the same time, and he's jumping between them, and he's got several scenes coming around his creative imagination. So yeah, if you're that good, great. But no kid, no young guy can do that. I certainly couldn't. And I don't think that's a real thing. I don't think that's a real technique outside of short story writing, which is not supposed to be that big in the first place. So you can get away with a 5-page story, which doesn't really go anywhere because it's not about the plot. You have just so much time to do that. It's about one event. And that's the plot. That's the thing. It's like, oh, the thing happened. All right. Dialogue, action, conflict, possible resolution, who knows, climax, whatever it is, because that's all you get to work with. That's the only real estate you're allowed to play with. So this is he's making a generalization about writing that is like, I don't think that's correct at all.
I sort of work it out in my head, but not in order. So I haven't got scene 1, scene 2.
Exactly. It's out of order. So if it's out of order, you plan it out. You have puzzle piece B over there, puzzle piece Z over there, and you keep them in your head. You go, all right, then you write them down so you don't have to remember them later. And then you organize it. That's what he's describing, a plan.
And on paper, at all, I've just got all these notions, some of which are weak and some of which are strong. And then as you're writing, and there's suddenly a weak one can become strong and a strong one can become weak, and you just follow it. It's like surfing it almost.
Kind of taking a leap, but not knowing where you're going to land it's a really respectable way to write.
I think it's worth remembering that writing advice is just that, advice. There are many self-proclaimed gurus who will insist on one specific method.
Oh, this is this great episode from Babylon 5. One of the best.
Being the correct one. I know of entire writing courses which literally only teach Joseph Campbell's hero's journey or Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I am by no means positioning myself as any kind of writing guru in making this video, but I can tell you from personal experience as someone who has been paid to write fiction and has written fiction in the hopes of getting paid, that the creative process is more than ticking some boxes. In fact, that's why I made a short-lived series of videos on this very topic several years ago.
Well, it is more than just ticking boxes, but you still have to tick the boxes with the things you're doing. It's like painting a picture or drawing or cleaning your room. Like there's steps involved, and they're logical. They're not like, okay, climax first, then intro, then inciting incident. Like, no. You follow a series of conflicts that lead to something and then lead to other conflicts. It's kind of hard to go backwards, but it's possible. I don't know. It seems as like he's written or made a bunch of videos that are structures on how to write, which involves planning things out. Anything you want to build in life, guys, whether it's a cake, a house, a car, a piece of music, you got to be taught how to do it. There's no one I've ever seen that can just out of the womb, so to speak, make stuff. So there's a teaching method involved. It takes time and discipline. So I don't know. This guy is proving to me that there is a order to things, and he has some understanding of that, and he made these videos to explain that. It's not all impromptu writing.
Ways people approach writing is I think my own process is definitely closer to Straczynski than it is to Moore, but they are both incredible talents and what they do works for them. I don't think there's a single writing hack or writing formula which everyone can use to write great stories without fail, but I've always liked how Nicholas Meyer described his process. Not only do I think it's useful as writing advice, but I also think it's applicable to the process of learning how to improve as a writer. He likened writing a script to taking a car journey. It's good to know where to begin and where to end, but if you map out every single leg of your journey in advance and never deviate, you could miss some pretty amazing sights. Thank you for watching.
That was it? An analogy of a journey? Okay. Don't plan everything out, guys. Oh dear. Well, we lost Whisp, and I think Keyframe left. But geez. Anyway, I'm not sure what to get out of all that. But at least we have stream memes. Maybe not. Who knows? We'll find out. Let me go check out the channel. Da-dee-da. See what we got here. Okay. November the 3rd. Here we go. What do we have for stream memes? As soon as I could find the window. There it is. Okay. Cylon's elbow dropping C-3PO. Interesting. I don't know what that's from. Could be The Simpsons. Who knows? Starbuck coming back with the Arrow of Apollo. Oh, yeah. Fun times. Hey, Anders, we're going to go live like cavemen, so if you could go ahead and fly the entire fleet into the sun and die in a fiery inferno, that would be great. Who knows if that actually happened? I don't remember. Could have been all a dream. There are many copies. Identical twins aboard the fleet? Haven't seen that. How my friends play strategy games. How I play strategy games. Depends on the game. If it's a 4X game, you gotta have some kind of idea, or else you're gonna die very quickly. Change of heart. Where do you think you're going, Starbuck? To the new show. What? Paulo, I realized I was wrong. The new show intellectually deals with important modern issues. It's a well-written, important show that it speaks to me. I want to be a part of it too. You can't track the pretty Cylon Starbuck. You can't frack the pretty Cylon Starbuck. What? Why not? They want babies. I'm willing to help try. Can you hook me up? Oh. That's a whole other show, guys. That's not what we got. This is Kosh. Kosh knows that John is going to be important to the upcoming Shadow War. Kosh helps push John in the right direction from time to time. Kosh is sensible. Be like Kosh. I don't know. Can anyone be like the omnipresent, telepathic, mysterious ancient beings whose entire existence is imperceptible to our own imaginations? Probably not the easiest thing to be like, but you can try. Oh boy, I'm going to build a Death Star and blow up planets. That's hilarious. You can be my new court jester. Aww. I think that's Emperor Cadagio. Trying to remember his last name. Yeah, well, that was a fun series. If anyone has not watched Bab 5, it's never a bad time. I don't know about the remasters, but what a great series. JMS was fantastic, and it's still my favorite science fiction show of all time so far. I'm hoping to get better ones as the years go by, but with the age of streaming, who knows these days? Unless you guys have recommendations. So, although probably the resolution on the remaster is not as good as is what it used to be. But who knows? Maybe they fixed the graphics. Who knows? Anyway, that was Rowan J Coleman. Yeah, I'm trying to remember his other video we covered that I just did not enjoy. There's something lacking in his explanation, especially when we're talking about writing. Writing is a labor of love. I always akin to it to a building a wall. It's heavy work. It's lifting. You're using a lot of effort to get those bricks as straight and as clean as possible. So writing well, writing short sentences, getting your point across, being clear, making things obvious to the audience so that you're not wasting everyone's time. It's a difficult process. Anyway, yes, you do need a plan or a semblance of a plan or a structure or a framework of some kind to make a story. You can't just wing it unless, again, you're doing something very creative like poetry or a short story, which the whole point of short story writing is to be creative and to do things differently, which is the very, very different discipline when writing a show for a sitcom, for TV, for stage, for a book, for a screenplay. Very different writing. So, not sure what he's talking about here. I wish he would be a bit more clear. But either way, thanks guys for paying attention. That was, it's a topic I love. I don't know about you, but I enjoyed talking about writing. And if you guys have any questions, be sure to leave them in the Discord. I'm happy to talk to you about writing. I know a bunch of people want to talk to me and chat about writing. It's kind of hard to do, but we can definitely do that in person, or rather one-on-one if you want, or just in chat on the Discord. That's easier for me. So thank you so much for listening. I lost all my panelists that had router issues. So have yourself a good evening. We'll talk to you soon. Good night.